Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry we couldn't be together for this first lesson, but I thought it was really important that we go ahead and get started with the second semester of our US and Colorado Civics lessons. So I'm going to record this on YouTube and put it out. Hopefully you will all watch it. And this way you can rewind if there's something you miss, or pause if you're getting sleepy, get up, walk around, come back. So I was hoping this afternoon to cover a little bit of a review of some of the older information that we covered in our US Civics the first semester of this year. And then I wanted to give an introductory lesson into Colorado history. So we're going to study the state of Colorado over the next several weeks at least. This is Unit 7 in our US and Colorado Civics book. So first, let me go over some of that very early stuff that we talked about US Civics. And really we're talking about the founding of this nation. So even before the Revolutionary War, before we had 13 colonies, we had some ships coming across 400 years ago. This is in the 17th century. And they brought a few people to settle here. And so there was a ship, if you'll remember, in 1620 named the Mayflower. Now they also set out with the Speedwell, 2 ships, but the Speedwell immediately had problems and was taking on water. So they put all of those settlers onto the Mayflower, 1 ship carrying twice as many people and provisions as they were supposed to have. So they had permission from the king to come over here and make a settlement, and they had certain boundaries that they had to stay within. Well, as the Mayflower approached the North American continent, they got blown off course and they landed north of those boundaries. So they knew they were going to have to form their own settlement, but not under the King of England, because they weren't within the area that they had permission to be. So they wrote what was called the Mayflower Compact. And in it, they made promises to one another as to how they would behave, and that they were going to form this settlement for the advancement of the Christian faith and under God and under God's authority. And then every man on that ship signed the Mayflower Compact. Now that document is one of the documents that our founding fathers looked at when they were forming this nation, when they were deciding what kind of government we would have and what the purpose for the government here in the United States would be. And that was still 150 years after the Mayflower landed in 1620. Now I want to talk a little bit about something that's being taught in public schools right now, and it's also being printed in the New York Times and given a great authority. This is called the 1619 Project. It's being written into history books, but it isn't actual history. It's almost 100% false. It has that teeny kernel of truth so that people will say, oh no, well, I guess the whole thing is true. But it's not. Here's the teeny bit of truth. The premise that they give for the 1619 Project is saying, no, the United States didn't begin in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. It began in the year 1619 with the arrival of the first black slave on this continent. Now, that's the kernel of truth. In 1619, a ship arrived here with settlers, and one of those settlers found a black man who said, I can't afford to pay my own passage over to the North American continent. If I promise to work for you as an indentured servant for 7 years, will you pay my passage? And the rich man said, yes, I will do that. They came to an agreement. The black man was brought over on a ship, landed here in a colony, and over the next 7 years, he refused to work. He was very lazy. He did not uphold his end of the contract. So the rich man went to court, and he told the judge and proved to the judge, this man has done no work. He has no character. He's very lazy. He didn't fulfill his end of the contract. And the judge agreed, yes, the black man did not fulfill his end. He didn't do the work. And so you may now own him as a slave because you paid his passage and he did not pay you back. That became the first black slave from Africa here in the United States colonies before we were the United States. So legally, that man was held as a slave. And there are 2 points that the 1619 Project does not mention. The first point is that the rich man, the owner, was also black. He was also African American. He was not owned by a white man. The second thing that the 1619 Project does not mention is that all over in every country of the world at that time, slavery was legal, and there were African American slaves, there were white slaves, there were Muslim slaves, there were slaves of every nationality owned by people of every nationality. White men owned white slaves. Indian men owned Indian slaves. It was common in every country on this planet. So these colonies here in North America were not unique. They weren't fighting against anyone trying to end slavery because slavery was a common thing. It had been throughout history of the world. If you remember, the Israelites owned slaves. They were kept as slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Slavery was very common. It isn't okay with God, but God did give some rules. Okay, since I know you own slaves, be kind to them. Don't mistreat them. There are rules about how to own slaves and have them in order and according to what is proper and what is good. You treat them as human beings. They also were creating in God's image. They have value as humans. So that is the story of how the first slave was owned here. The next thing that the 1619 Project says is that our Revolutionary War was fought in order to preserve slavery here in this country. That is also completely false. Never was slavery is spoken of in our Declaration of Independence, in talking with the king, here's one of the things that we want to do and you won't let us. No, in fact, here in some of the colonies, we had written laws that said it is illegal to buy or sell another human. And the king was the one who said, oh, no, these are my colonies. Slavery is legal in my England. Slavery will be legal in my colonies. And he forced the governors of these colonies to remove those laws from the books. So indeed, we weren't trying to preserve slavery. King George of England was trying to preserve slavery. And we here in the colonies were trying to make it illegal. So I just wanted to mention that 1619 Project when talking about 1620, when the Mayflower arrived, because here in today's current day classroom, the 1619 Project is being taught as truth, and it is not. So I want you guys to remember that, to learn about slavery here, and to be able to have an intelligent conversation if the subject comes up with any of your friends, any of your teachers, anyone else. I want you to be able to talk about those facts clearly, calmly, without getting into an argument, only a discussion about what is really true. Okay, so remember the Mayflower Compact? That was one of the documents that our founding fathers used when they were looking at what is going to be the purpose for this nation. Later, as they wrote the Declaration of Independence and then the Constitution for the United States. Okay, one other thing I want to review, because we cover it every week, is that preamble to the Constitution. We were given 6 things that we want to accomplish when writing this Constitution, which will tell us what type of government we're going to form. So the first reason, as I'm sure all of you remember, you guys memorize these very well, was in order to form a more perfect union. We know that this union is not perfect, but we're going to try to make a more perfect union to the best of our ability. And one of the things written in the Constitution is how to amend the Constitution, how to make changes to it. That way, our founding fathers put in place areas where, as problems were discovered, they could be corrected. So again, because our Constitution couldn't deal with slavery at the time, the southern states wouldn't go along with that just yet. They knew it would have to be dealt with later. So our founding fathers wrote the Constitution knowing later amendments would be made, changes to the Constitution which would outlaw slavery. So they made it possible for us to outlaw slavery. Again, this speaks to the 1619 Project. They claim that the founding fathers were trying to preserve slavery, when in fact the founding fathers made sure that this would be a nation where slavery could be outlawed, and the sooner the better. Okay, let's move on to Colorado history. Now, I'm going to do just a bit of introduction this week. I'm not really even going to hit Unit 7.1 very much. I'm just going to touch on it. But I want you to know some of the things about our state that are not necessarily covered in the book. Okay, so our state has several nicknames, mottos, the state tree, the state flower. We're going to look at what some of those things are today. I want you to make notes in your notebook, and I want you to choose one of these items and do a, not necessarily even a report, but look up that item. And as an example, I will tell you the state bird is the lark bunting. So if I choose the state bird, I'm going to memorize that name, the lark bunting. Then I want you to look up, Wikipedia is fine. We don't trust it for a lot of things, but facts about the state of Colorado, okay, I will trust it for those, just the facts. So I would go to Wikipedia, look up the lark bunting, draw a picture of the lark bunting, and learn just a few things about that bird. Where does it live? What does it eat? How does it build its nest? What kind of tree does it prefer? Okay, so very small, not a full report. Just look up a few facts. Okay, so the nickname of Colorado is the Centennial State. Now, I don't know if you guys recognize the word centennial. A cent in Latin means 100 or 100th. A cent is 100th of a dollar. Okay, so we're the Centennial State because we officially became a state in 1876. That's exactly 100 years after the United States officially became a nation. 1776. Upon the Declaration of Independence being signed, we became a nation. In 1876, Colorado officially became a state. So our nickname is the Centennial State, 100 years later. Our slogan is Colorful Colorado. You'll see those signs as you're driving on the freeway if you leave or enter the state of Colorado. There'll be a sign, Welcome to Colorful Colorado. So those are fun. The capital is Denver, and that is also our most populous city. That means it has the most people. So a lot of states, that's not necessarily true. You'll have to learn 2 different city names. Here in Colorado, we wanted to make it easy on you, so we made our most populous state our state capital, Denver. The bird, like I said, is the lark bunting. The Colorado tree is the Colorado blue spruce. The Colorado state fish, the greenback cutthroat trout, which is interesting. The cutthroat trout doesn't mean that they're mean and they kill other fish. It means it has a red line across its throat. It looks like its throat has been cut. The Colorado flower is the columbine, very beautiful flower. The Colorado state mammal is the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. The Colorado state dinosaur is the Stegosaurus. The Colorado motto, one of my favorite, nothing without providence. And if you guys recognize that word providence, it is very much linked to God. Providence is a nickname for God. Providence means this happened by God's providence because God intervened and made it happen. So you wouldn't know it today, but back in 1876, we chose as our state motto, nothing without providence. And some people say that is nothing without God. One of the funnest things that I wrote down because I thought it was hilarious is the Colorado state sport, burro racing. We used to have a lot of burros. They would climb up and down the Rocky Mountains. We had silver mining and gold mining. Burros were used. And so we would have some fun by racing our burros. So that became the Colorado state sport. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the sport teams that we have in Colorado today. Of course, the Denver Broncos for football, the Denver Nuggets for basketball, the Colorado Rapids is our soccer team, the Colorado Rockies is our baseball team, the Colorado Mammoth, that's cricket. So we have several state sport teams, and since Denver is our only really big city, those are it for the entire state. In, for example, Ohio, they have the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals because they have 2 big cities. Each one sponsors a professional football team. Here in Colorado, 1 city, Denver. Everything is about Denver. I also wanted to talk to you about some of the things that Colorado is known for. The Rocky Mountains, of course. A very famous mountain in the Rocky Mountains here in Colorado is Pikes Peak. That's down just above Colorado Springs. And it's named for Zebulon Pike, the man who discovered it. Okay, if you can discover a mountain. It's not our tallest mountain. It's just a very famous one. And it was from Pikes Peak that America the Beautiful, the poem, was inspired. And then we also have that become a song. So you might just look up that song and sing it a few times. You should learn these American iconic songs. One of the other things that Colorado is known for, of course, is the Colorado River. It originates in the Rocky Mountains. Some of the snow we get up there begins to melt, little trickles run together, become a tiny stream. That stream becomes a little bigger and a little bigger, and what began as a little creek, it turns into the mighty Colorado River, a very large river. It runs through the Grand Canyon and all the way down into Mexico. It used to run into Mexico, I should say. We now take so much water out of it to use for farming, and California takes a lot of that water, so that by the time it gets to Mexico, it might be a little muddy trickle, or it might just be completely dry in the summer. Colorado became a U.S. territory in the year 1861. I hope that year rings a bell with some of you. Something happened in the United States in 1861, besides Colorado being admitted as an official territory. That's the year that the Civil War broke out. And so at that time, territories were declared either slave or free. A lot of the new territories were declared free, which meant slavery was not legal in that territory. And indeed, Colorado was a free territory. Slaves were not allowed to be bought or sold or imported in any way into Colorado. Ulysses S. Grant was president at the time. And if you'll remember, when the Civil War broke out, Ulysses S. Grant was president in the North, and General Lee led the armies in the South. Ulysses S. Grant led our armies here. Colorado was the 38th state admitted into the Union as an official state August 1st, 1876. So less than a month after July 4th, and just over 100 years after July 4th, 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So August 1st, 1876. Now, a lot of men were finding out that you could make money in Colorado, and what they would do is leave their families behind in the East, travel to Colorado, and try to earn money to send back to their families. Colorado was a pretty wild territory and not necessarily a great place to bring women and children at the time that we were a territory. So men would come here and hope to strike it rich silver mining or gold mining or doing something else, anything. And then they would send money back to their families. So when Colorado first started out, we had a lot of men. Now, I did a report on a black woman who had been a freed slave in the East. Her name was Clara Brown. She earned her own freedom. She traveled around, and she ended up wanting to come to Colorado because she'd had a young daughter sold. This daughter was 8 or 9 years old. And she wanted to find that daughter, and she'd heard rumors that there was a woman with that name here in Colorado. So she wanted to travel here and see if she could find her daughter, who was now a grown woman, and just find out what had happened to her. This was her only surviving child. This woman's name is Clara Brown. Her nickname is the Angel of the Rockies. She came to Colorado looking for her daughter, but didn't have enough money to pay passage on a train to get here, or with a wagon train. So she found a wagon train, and she offered herself as seamstress and cook on that wagon train if they would bring her for free. And they agreed. because, like I said, it was a lot of men traveling, but not very many women. And they said, oh, a woman who can cook and sew? Yes, please. So she joined that wagon train, and she worked hard, long hours when the men were able to rest and take a day off. She was not. Everybody had to eat. She did all their laundry, all their cooking, and mended their clothes. So she came to Colorado looking for her daughter. She didn't find her until much later, but while she was here, she set up houses. She set up missions, and she was a missionary. She spread the gospel all over, and she helped poor people, black people, freed slaves, anybody who needed help. There were often fist fights. It was rough here in Colorado. There would be drunken brawls, but she was always here trying to help others. So in 1977, a stained glass portrait of Clara, the angel of the Rockies, was installed in the rotunda of the Colorado State Capitol. So she was one of Colorado's great pioneers, and she was honored. If you ever go to the state capitol, see if you can find this stained glass picture of Clara Brown, the angel of the Rockies. Okay, the next thing I wanted to teach, and this will be our last thing for today, is I want to teach each of you how to draw a picture of the Colorado state flag. It's so simple. You don't have to be an artist. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is draw a rectangle so that it will look like a flag. You're going to divide that rectangle into thirds horizontally and divide it into thirds vertically. That's your beginning of the Colorado flag. You only have one more thing to draw. In the left side, and I know this video is probably backwards, so go to your left, not my left, and draw a circle, not as big as your flag. It should still have half of this top third and half of this bottom third left. And then you draw a smaller circle within the bigger circle. Make a couple of lines so that that big fat tire looks like the letter C. C for Colorado, C for Centennial. Remember, this is the Centennial State. That's our nickname. And that's it. That's your Colorado flag. All you have to do now is look up the colors and find out where is it blue and where is it white, where is it red, and where is it gold. And by the way, those are the four colors that represent Colorado. Liberty, white for freedom and purity, gold because we found gold here in the hills. Red to me represents the blood of Christ, always. And sure enough, that's a red C. C for Colorado, C for Centennial, C for Christ. The stripes are blue on the top and bottom, white in the middle. This center circle in the middle of this C is what is gold. That's the little gold nugget in the Colorado flag. So please, everybody, draw a picture of the Colorado flag in your notes and go to, again, you can look at Wikipedia because this is very factual. We know it's actually going to be correct. Go to Wikipedia, look at those colors, and color your flag appropriately. So I want to thank you guys for being faithful to continue in our civics studies, United States, for the first semester. The state of Colorado and its history we'll really begin to dive into next week. So I love you all, and I will see you next week.